When it comes to diversity and inclusion, there are some moments that you really remember. And I know one of the moments for me that stuck out was when ITV put a print ad together in response to the backlash that diversity received when they did the BLM dance on Britain's Got Talent. And I tell you, the thing that really struck me was the phrase on the ad which says, "We are changed by what we see, just as we are changed when we are seen." And that felt really profound actually, and it made me realise afresh how important it is to represent all sorts of people and make sure that advertising is inclusive, and how powerful that can be for people. So we decided at System1 to join forces with DECA Media Consultants and ITV to run a study looking at 30 diverse ads from across the spectrum, and to try and understand this: how does these ads make people feel that are represented, but also how does it make the general population feel, and what can we learn from them? So we wanted to be able to put together some guidance for advertisers and brand owners on how to get inclusion and representation right. Now, we covered a very broad spectrum from British Black, British Asian, LGBTQ+, disability, women, and also older age groups. And in fact, even the process of selecting the 30 ads was quite interesting in and of itself, seeing how easy it was to find or not ads that represented those different groups, and also making sure that we got a really fair and equal split across so we could get as rich insight as possible. Now, some of the advertising is well known, some of it was quite controversial and got lots of discussion, and some of it isn't particularly well known, so we wanted to get a really broad spectrum. So I put together a short reel now that gives you a little flavour of some of the ads that we tested in our study. So how do we measure emotion in advertising? Well, this is where System1's world-leading approach to testing advertising comes in. We start with a psychologist called Paul Ekman, and Paul Ekman put together the core human emotions that we all feel. Regardless of our ethnicity, our gender, where we come from, there are certain emotions that are all universal. And what we do at System1 is we ask people to watch an advert, and at the end of the advert to tell us which emotion best describes how they feel. We also ask them to tell us how intense that emotion is, and that's important because the more intense the emotion, the more likely they are to go and respond to the advertising. And what we then do is we ask them to watch the advert again, but this time we want to understand second by second how they feel, and that's important so we can understand how the story unfolds and how different emotions come into play as people are watching the ad. So I'm going to show you 3 ads now, and I'm going to take you through what we call the face trace. Now, this is a second by second breakdown of the various emotions that people feel. So as I play the ad, have a look, and in dark green you've got the emotion of surprise, in light green you've got happiness, grey is neutrality, and then some of the darker colours represent negative emotions. Now we take this information and we convert it into a 5-star rating, 1 star being no impact at all, 5-star being a large impact for the brand and a big impact on market share. We can also find out some other things as well, particularly reasons for emotion. Why is it people feel the emotions they do? And that can be very revealing. We can also ask what associations does the advert create in the mind of the consumer in terms of the brand, and that can also be very revealing. So what we do in this study is we compare the emotional response to the advert for the national representative group against the audience that are represented in the advertising. That allows us to compare between the two and give us the interesting insight into how diversity and representation affects how we feel about the ad. So now let's get into it. We're going to show you now 3 ads that we did in the study that I think illustrate some very interesting points and also illustrate some good examples of how to get it right. And we're going to start with Nike.
Can you be an athlete? You, pregnant. You, a mother. That depends. What is an athlete? Someone who moves? Sounds like you. Someone who gets it done, no matter what. You do that. Someone who listens to her body. Also you. Someone who defies gravity. You. Someone who deals with the pain, hits her limit, and pushes past it. Pushing, pushing, pushing. Someone who earns every single win. You, you, you. So, can you be an athlete? If you aren't, no one is.
Okay, so what do we learn about the Nike ad? Well, the first thing that particularly struck me actually, and hopefully you saw this as you watched it, was just how similar the emotional reaction was between the nationally representative group that were watching it compared to black women. So what that tells me is actually we were all feeling the same emotion as we watched it, which I think is quite an interesting conclusion of this. Now here's the difference. So remember I said that when we ask people how they feel, we also ask them how intense that emotion was for them. And this is where the difference is. So an average intensity on our 3-point scale might be 1.5. This scored 1.4 with the NatRep sample, but for black women it went right up to 2.1, which is very, very high. So what representation did in this case was make the emotion more intense for people. And as I said before, intensity of emotion is more likely to lead to action. And what kind of happiness did people feel? Well, what we found was that it didn't matter who you were, people were inspired, uplifted, and they felt a sense of pride as they watched this. And that was very, very universal across it. So what this advert did very well was appeal to everyone, but heighten the emotion for those that are represented. Now, what better person to ask about this advert and get her opinion on it than Ade Rawcliffe, who's Group Director of Diversity and Inclusion at ITV. So let's hand over and hear what Ade thinks about this ad.
Let me tell you what I thought about this ad from a personal perspective. It really, really spoke to me. I really felt represented by it. Seeing black women pregnant was an image that spoke to me really strongly. As a mother of 2 sons, I very rarely see black women on screen in this way, in such a bold, authentic way. So it really spoke to me. There were 2 particular scenes that I thought were particularly powerful. The first scene is seeing Serena, one of the most iconic sportswomen on the planet, but what the scene does is emphasises that her most important job in life is that of a mother. So I really related to that. Then the other scene that really spoke to me was the idea when the baby's been raised above the woman's head and we're comparing strength, and I think that's really powerful because I don't think it's not just about physical strength, but it's about the emotional strength of being a mother. So it really spoke to me on that level, because I think that we've got better as an industry, but I still think there's an underrepresentation of pregnant women who are black on screen, and I think the image we have of pregnancy is often seen through a lens of the majority population. So it really spoke to me in that sense. In my day job, leading diversity and inclusion at ITV, this was a perfect example of authenticity and the creativity and the added value that diversity, representation, equality and inclusion can bring to your brand. I think Nike has a real history in doing this, but I think the inclusive nature of the way you see a disabled mother, you see black mothers, you see a mother wearing a hijab, I think it feels like everyone is included, so everyone can relate to it. And I think the story of pregnancy is a much more universal theme, because we've all had pregnant wives or girlfriends, and also we've all come from a woman at some point as well. So even though you might think it's about pregnancy, actually it's about the universal story of humanity, and I think they do that really, really well. So I think it's a really good example of the power of inclusion to send very strong messages and emotionally connect with your brand.
So it's great to hear from Ade there about what she thought about the Nike ad. Let's move on now to look at a great ad from Renault.
Come on, Puppet. is gonna be the day that they're gonna throw it back to you. By now, you should have somehow realized what you gotta do. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now. Backbeat, the word is on the street that the fire in your heart is out. I'm sure you've heard it all before, but you never really had a doubt. I don't believe that anybody feels the way I do about you now. Today was gonna be the day, but they'll never throw it back to you. Said maybe you're gonna be the one that saves me. And after all, you're my Wonderwall.
So what can we learn from that great Renault ad? Well, actually, it's rather similar to the Nike one we've seen before, in that what the face trace shows us is how similar the emotional journey was between the NatRep audience and LGBTQ+ as well. And that shows that great advertising really does have mass appeal and takes us on a journey. And if you tell the story very well, it can appeal to everybody. But just like Nike, what we find is that intensity varies. So what we find is intensity is greater for the audience that's represented, and they feel the emotion more. And that's very important because that translates into a higher star rating. So star rating for that audience was 3.5, whereas for the NatRep audience was 2.6. So a significant improvement. And what did people take out of the ad? Well, actually, it turns out that the type of happiness people felt was exactly the same. It didn't matter whether you're in the audience or not. Everyone felt uplifted by the story. Everyone felt a sense of pride. And that's a good illustration of when advertising works well. But again, rather than hear from me, let's go now to Shane MacRory, who's Senior Consultant at DECA, and let's find out what he thinks about this ad.
I'm really pleased that I get to talk to you about the Renault Clio advert. It's one of my favourite adverts from last year. And it's one of my favourite adverts from last year because it's an everyday story. And stories are the things that bind us. Stories are the things that we share. It's an everyday story of two people who are in love, two people who are a family, two people who have their ups and their downs, two people who have heartbreak. But more importantly, I love it because it was a representation that I didn't see when I was growing up. And it's a representation that says it's okay to be who you are and not to be afraid. And what's even more important is that they showed it a lot. You know, it wasn't just for Christmas. It wasn't just for Pride. It was shown repeatedly. And that repeatedly is great because that's authentic, because I am gay 24/7. And having those representations shown repeatedly is a great feeling to see an advert that reflects me. What's also really great is that it recognizes that as a community, we have value, and that progressive adverts are better at improving engagement, loyalty, trust, repeat business, and that diversity isn't just one thing. And the diversity isn't a minority. If you think about it, non-white British, 20%, LGBTQ plus, 7%, disabled, 20%. Very quickly, we're getting into the territory of majority, not minority. But it's a great result. It's a great advert. And what's really great about it is that it shows that everybody else felt the same. Everybody else felt happiness. Everybody else felt sadness at the same time. The only difference being is I feel it more because it connects to me more, because it reflects me more. So it'll be really interesting to see what comes out of this study. It'll be really interesting to see which adverts connect in the same way or which adverts maybe miss a beat. But either way, I can't wait to see the rest of the study.
So we've just heard from Shane there, and now we're going to go to our third advert in the session, which is from Maltesers.
So, new boyfriend.
Right.
And we are back at his, getting a little
Frisky.
little frisky. My hands may have been wandering slightly. Go on. And then I start having a spasm.
No.
Which he misinterprets.
So awkward.
He was a good lady.
You're so bad.
That's what he said.
So I hope you enjoyed that Maltesers ad. I certainly did. And what can we learn from this? Well, actually, like the others, it's surprising how similar the face trace is between the NatRep audience and the audience with disability, showing that actually we can all feel the same things. But again, just like the others, intensity was slightly raised with the disability audience, and that led to an exceptional star rating. So that got a 5.1, putting it in the very, very top 1% on our database, but still a very, very good 3.7 star for the NatRep audience. Now, the interesting thing here is the use of humour, and humour is a very, very effective tool in advertising, and we know from our studies it leads to effectiveness, and it allows us to have what might otherwise be a more tricky conversation, and they've done very well at doing that. And what associations did it create? Well, actually, fun, friendship, diversity and inclusion all came through from the audience, whether or not you're in the diversity audience or the audience at large. Now, I thought it'd be interesting to ask somebody that makes advertising and crafts advertising to give us her point of view on this ad. So I'm going to now ask Laurie Meakin, founder of Joint, to give us her perspective on what made this ad particularly good.
So I love this ad. At a personal level, it's just a fantastic bit of empathetic, fun, engaging storytelling that just invites us in, doesn't it? And it makes us feel part of the action, makes us enjoy being part of their world, which is what great storytelling always does. I worked as an English teacher over 2 decades ago, and one of the things I learned there is the power of storytelling to help other people project into other people's lives, into other people's worlds, and experience lives that they don't live themselves. I think great advertising absolutely does that, and I think this research absolutely demonstrates the power of that, how it makes for better advertising for everybody. But if you're one of those groups who's often misrepresented or underrepresented, it's so much more powerful for you to see yourself and be able to enjoy projecting into your life for a change. And I think the way that this ad's been shot, there's lots of stuff that we can learn from and admire here about the way it's been constructed. First of all, authentic actors. The woman who's holding court there is clearly disabled. She's holding court, she's the one with the power, she's got her friends around her, and the way it's framed, we're being invited in. It's like we're part of their girl gang, enjoying that stuff with them, which is fabulous. I think the other thing that's really important is the way that humour's used in this. Humour's a brilliant way of getting us over difficulties, over kind of things that might be awkward to talk about. I think the thing that's so important though is going who's making the joke, who's the butt of the joke, and who's empowered through that humour. And again here we see that main actress, that main character, she's the one who's making the joke, and she's doing it in a way that allows us into her world. So there's no threat, there's no fear, there's no worry, and we're able to just come right in and enjoy that. And it's no wonder the data shows that everybody enjoys that. I think the other thing that's really interesting, sort of as a tip for thinking about this kind of stuff, is first of all to know that it works, to know that it's a brilliant thing for our audiences, and that will make better work and better ads, and it will make great ads even better. So that's a brilliant thing. I think just including voices, inviting them in front of the camera, behind the camera, in every part of our business is just going to help us represent the human beings we're talking to so much better.
So that was just a preview of some of the adverts that we've tested in our study. Now the main event is going to be on the 13th of July, so please register. We will be sharing the full debrief and the learnings across all 30 ads that we've tested. So on behalf of System1, DECA and ITV, thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to sharing all the details with you very soon.